Hey everyone, this is Anshul Sadaria, software engineer at Google. In this video, I am going to talk about very interesting system design. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, you would know from my Instagram stories that I am a travel freak. No, this video is not about Instagram. It's about a rather very important part of all our journeys, hotel reservation system. But before we dive deep into the system design of Airbnb, Booking.com, Agoda, Make My Trip, and so on, do check out Scalar's free masterclasses taken by industry leading experts only on Scalar's event page. Link is in the description below. So now if you have followed my other system design videos, like I have covered system designs for Uber, Tinder, Twitter, and so on, you must be aware about the typical flow of a system design. Like we are talking about high level system design, the typical flow for it. We will start with understanding the customer user journeys first, like how the customers interact with the product, what is the typical flow, and then translate those user journeys into functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So first, let's get started with the functional requirements. Okay, now here is just a fun fact that in the world as of 2023, there are approximately 187,000 hotels with an estimated 17.5 million guest rooms. Now you might be wondering why I have added this as a footnote. Now you will realize when we are doing back of the envelope calculations, this will be very useful for us in understanding what our choice of database should be. But before that, let's hold on our horses, and before that, let's focus on what are the different customer user journeys. Now, whenever you onboard to any hotel reservation platform, okay, I have just added some of them like Airbnb, Expedia, Booking.com, Agoda, Make My Trip, and so on. So what's the first step you do, right? You search for a hotel. I mean, it can be a location. For example, I am looking for hotels in Delhi or Mumbai, wherever I am visiting. So the first thing we do as a user, the first thing I will do is search for a hotel. Now there can be different criteria. It can be location, it can be name of the hotel. I can add filters like 4-star rated, or the guest rating is more than 9 or like 10. It can be any filters that I can add on top of my search query. Now, once I receive a list of hotels, like what all different hotels are there, along with their prices and everything, the second step I would do is click on the hotel of my choice, whatever hotel I like. Okay, so what that will do is it will fetch the hotel details from the system. So fetch hotel details is other user journey, like the second part of our hotel reservation system. Now, the third step after this would be to select a room of your choice in that hotel, right? There will be different type of rooms like mountain facing, pool facing, or it can be sea facing if your hotel is located on a beach and so on. So the third one would be fetch the details of the room. Now we have fetched the room details. The second step would be we will check all the different rooms that are available and choose one amongst them. Okay, or we can obviously check other hotels and other rooms and so on. Like that's an iterative process. But then the next step would be proceed with the booking order, like book room or select room. That would be one of the choices that you would go ahead with. So create a booking order. Now, just as a warning throughout this video, like I might interchangeably use booking or reservation terms like that, but both of them mean one and the same thing over here. Create a booking order would be my fourth user journey. And then obviously, like once the order is placed and once the system has confirmed that there is inventory for the room that I have selected, then we will go ahead with the payment, right? And lastly, like after the payment is done and the booking is confirmed, what we can do, like if our check-in date is coming nearer, then we might be fetching the details of that booking, or we might also want to look at all the bookings that we have done with that particular platform. So fetch bookings is another thing that we can do. Now, these are some of the user journeys which I have enlisted right now. We can add more as we think about the different services that will be a part of the system. But one important thing that we should never forget is understand what all different stakeholders which will be there in our system. Like user is one stakeholder, but what happens before that? The admin of a hotel needs to register the hotel with the system. They will need to add the room details, hotel details, add the prices and so on. Everything needs to be done by the admin before we can start booking rooms in that hotel. So along with user, we need to understand what all different customer user journeys are there for the admin as well. So now let's focus on the admin part. Now what does the admin do? Add a new hotel. Like if they are starting for the first time, they're getting onboarded to our system. Add a hotel. Then they can add rooms. Add or remove or update, like anything is possible. They can add, remove or update the rooms. Add, remove or update rooms. Now same thing is possible with hotel as well. Let's say, like, I don't want that to happen, but let's say some hotel went bankrupt for any reason. Okay, they might want to remove it, they might want to update some details and so on. So I'm not just writing it over here, but it is self-explanatory that we are also considering updating and removing the hotel details as well. So now what we have done is we have done addition of a hotel, addition of a room. Now what the admin can do is they can check what all bookings are there. For example, today is a check-in, like today there is some date, okay, and the receptionist wants to check what all different bookings are there on a particular day. So this is a very valid operation from an admin point of view, that they also might want to fetch the bookings based on the hotel. So that is also possible, fetch bookings. Now, as far as my understanding goes, I think these are sufficient customer user journeys for us to get started and then translate them into functional and non-functional requirements. So now let's convert them into functional requirements first. Okay, so we'll start with users' functional requirements first. Okay, so they might want to register themselves. I think that is very common thing, like any system that you take. User registration is one such step which is very, very trivial. I have covered that in all of the system designs before, so I'm not repeating that over here because then it will make everything a bit redundant. Okay, so let's focus on the crucial steps only. Let's go chronologically, that user should be able to search on the platform. Okay, that is first functional requirement. Second functional requirement is get all the hotels or get a particular hotel, and similarly get all the rooms in a hotel or get details about a particular room. Okay, so now get hotel, and now I am just marking it hotels because let's say, for example, I am writing Mumbai in the search query. So it should return me all the hotels which are labeled by that location Mumbai. Okay, so get single hotel or multiple hotel. And third, similarly, get rooms. I mean, like if you are in a habit of understanding the customer user journeys, you would realize that customer user journeys and functional requirements are mapped with each other. Okay, so get room or rooms, and over here both of them we would like the details. You know, for room the details can be, for example, either it's swimming pool facing or what's the size of the room, is the hair dryer available in the room and so on. Like all the details should be present along with the room details. Next, we want the user to be able to create a booking, to make a booking for their check-in date, check-out date, and like whatever type of room they want to book and so on. So create a booking. And then obviously after the booking is made, okay, like before the booking is made, we obviously need to do payment. So make a payment. Now you might be wondering why I am adding all of these verbs in front of the functional requirements like search, get hotels, get room details, create booking, make payment, and so on. Now these functional requirements would further be translated into the APIs that we are going to expose to both the type of customers, user and the admin. So this will help us understand what different CRUD APIs we want to expose to which type of a user. Now a booking is created, we have made a payment against it, and now if you realize like obviously you must have used a hotel reservation system, any hotel reservation system, and you must have realized when you create a booking, it gives you 10 or 15 minutes or something like that to complete the payment, right? So we also need to ensure that that consistency is maintained. Like that's something that we will discuss in detail, but I just want to ensure that you have this thing in mind about what all different flows are there for a user. So there can be a 15-minute delay or a 15-minute allowance for the user before a payment is made and when the booking is created. Okay, so some X minute gap, I'm just writing it over here. We can make a choice when we go into details about it. So X minute allowance, I will just write. I mean, it can be time to live as well, X minute TTL, time to live. Now, after the payment is made, we should be allowed, or we, by we, I am talking about the normal users like you and me. Okay. So we should be allowed to fetch the booking details as well. So I'll just write get booking details. And now I think that's it for the user side. Now talking about the functional requirements for the admin side, this will be similar to what all customer user journeys we discussed. So for the admin, it will be create or an end update. I mean, we also want them to be able to update or delete the hotel and the hotel details. Now the second functional requirement for the admin would be like similar as we have done in hotels. We would want them to be able to create, update or delete a room as well. So I am not making efforts to write all of that again. I will just write rooms. And lastly, as we observed, we also want them to be able to fetch the booking details. Now you might be wondering that a lot of reservation systems like Airbnb and so on, they allow you to modify the booking as well or cancel the booking as well. Why are we not covering that part? So I want to focus on a MVP first, which is the minimum viable product, and then we can add further features to it, like adding update or cancellation. For booking, adding update or cancellation features is not a big deal. Like once we expose a particular service, that service can also handle both the different types of requests. But right now I want to focus on only the minimum requirements which can help us create the hotel reservation system. So now lastly, let me complete this get booking details. Now just one observation, like for the user, like get booking details is common for both the users and the admin. The difference over here is for the user, the get booking details will be by the user ID. Like I should not be able to fetch bookings for some different user. That constraint should be honored. So it can be by user ID, like whoever, like whatever user is logged in, they should be able to fetch bookings for that user only. So that authorization is important. And similarly, like the admin should not be able to access the bookings for some other hotel, right? That would be a really bad experience. Like it's a security fault if we are able to give the bookings of some other hotel to some other admin. So this will be by the hotel ID, right? Now we have discussed the functional requirements for both the customer, like the user and user like us, and the admins of the hotel. Now it's time to discuss some of the non-functional requirements. Now what are non-functional requirements? Non-functional requirements are something which don't directly affect the flow of a user, any type of a user. It rather affects the experience of the user. It can be latency, it can be availability and so on. So that is what we are going to discuss in non-functional requirements. So now obviously we want to get started with low latency. And when we talk about low latency, it doesn't mean super low latency like Uber system design, where we want the users to be able to book the cabs as fast as possible. It is okay if our booking is taking 1 second or a few hundred milliseconds and so on. We don't need to optimize a lot on the latency part. We don't want it super low. On the other hand, we also don't want it to be quite high that it affects the overall experience of the user. Now, secondly, it should be highly available. Obviously, if I'm not able to access the system at a particular time, like being an impatient person, obviously I would be frustrated, but I will try it after some time, that if it's available, then I should be able to book it. But if the experience is recurring, that it's not available for a highly long period of time, then the user will shift from one platform to the other platform, because the same hotel might be available on the other platform as well. So high availability is really important in such competitive markets. High availability. Now the third point being, it should be highly consistent as well. Now you might be wondering how this is both highly consistent and highly available. According to the CAP theorem, it suggests that a system cannot be available and consistent, highly available and strongly consistent, both at the same time. But one important thing to remember over here is, we want different services which are highly available and different services which are highly consistent. For example, as a user, I have made one booking. Okay, so I want the inventory to reflect that booking so that the other person is not able to book the same room. Okay, for example, only one room is available right now, and if that change is not reflected in our database, then the other user would also try to double book the system. So we don't want such double bookings or double charging for the same room again and again. So that is the consistency part that I'm talking about here. And by highly available, what I mean is that our search service should always be highly available. Our booking service, that when I'm trying to create a booking order, that should be highly available. So those are two different sets of services which I'm talking about over here, which are highly available and which are highly consistent. So this doesn't exactly fall into the category of CAP theorem, and it doesn't violate it. And lastly, a very important non-functional requirement is highly concurrent. High concurrency. Now when we will talk about some of the different numbers, you would realize why concurrency is important, and we will also discuss the concurrency issue in detail. Like, let's say two people, there is only one room remaining and two people are trying to book the room at the same time. So it should try to handle the request of only one user, and at the same time, if multiple rooms are available. Okay, let's say there are 10 rooms available. Then if 3 people are trying to book it concurrently, it should be both consistent and the concurrent booking request should be handled. For booking, for payment, and for search service, like, concurrency is really important for such highly popular systems. Now let's talk about some of the numbers which will help us decide the choice of database, which will help us in our further design as well. Now, like, if you remember in the first page itself, in the first slide, I talked about 187K hotels with almost 20 million rooms. Okay, now possibly to get started with, we would not like to aim at that number. Obviously, our end goal is to reach that stage where we are able to cater all the hotels in the world. But let's start with the largest hotel chain in the world, which is Marriott. Okay, so according to some numbers, this may or may not be true because I have just Googled about it and I'm trying to work on top of it. So there are 10K hotels of Marriott, and there are approximately 1 million rooms. Again, I have Googled it. I don't give a guarantee about all of these numbers, but this is the target numbers for which we are going to design our system. Okay, 10K hotels and 1 million rooms is going to be our target. Now this basically translates into 100 rooms per hotel, which is quite normal for such big hotel chains, you know. So 100 rooms per hotel. Now let's understand the QPS for our booking service, like how many bookings are created per second, to understand the different writes that will happen on our system. Like, if we want to understand the reads and the writes, if we want to bifurcate them, like what all different reads are happening and what all different writes are happening. Okay, from the user side, there is only one write when a booking is complete. Okay, before that, the user is only searching for certain things, getting the hotel details, getting the room details, and so on, which falls onto the read part. So for write, there is only booking details that we are going to write into our system. For read, it will be hotel details, room details, and so on. From the admin point of view, we don't care a lot about their numbers. I will tell you why. The reason is very simple, because imagine a admin adding a hotel, updating hotel details, updating room details and so on. It is not a very frequent operation. Okay, hence the QPS for that is going to be fairly low as compared to what the QPS is going to be created by the normal users. So let's first focus on the number of bookings, like what's the QPS for the bookings. Now it is estimated, again some ballpark numbers, that around 80% of the rooms are occupied. Like this is the occupancy rate of a normal hotel chain which is doing quite well. Okay, so 80% is our occupancy on any day. Okay, possibly Mondays, Tuesday, like weekdays, it might be less, but for then again on the weekends, it might be 100% occupied. So doing an average, we can assume like 75 to 80% occupancy. For the ease of our calculations, I will go ahead with 80%. Now, on an average, a person does booking for 3 to 4 nights. On some cases, they might be booking for lower number of days if it's something related to a business event. But if they are going on a vacation, it can be for longer durations like 3 to 4 nights. So again, for the ease of calculations, I will choose 4-night booking on average. Okay. So now, if there is 80% occupancy, it translates to 1 million into 0.8 and 4 nights booking on average, which means 1 million into 0.8 divided by 4 is going to be our total number of bookings for a particular day. Okay. Now again, if we want to translate that into queries per second, then obviously there are 86,400 seconds in a day, which I can assume, again for the ease of calculations, to be 10 to the power 5. This will be roughly 100k. Yes, it's 10 to the power 5. Now these numbers are really important. You don't want to miss out. Like instead of 10 to the power 5, if you do 10 to the power 4 or 10 to the power 6, it can lead to drastically different types of systems. So make sure that the calculations are as accurate as possible. And we want to divide it by the total number of seconds in a day. So let me just do a quick calculation. So this is 8 divided by 4 and it makes 2 bookings per second. Now, if you remember from the Uber system design video that I created, the write QPS or the transactions per second, like QPS stands for query per second. This exactly is not a query per second. It's a transaction per second. So we will use the term TPS. Okay. So for Uber, this TPS was quite high and that influenced the choice of our database to be a NoSQL one. Okay. Now in this case, this is fairly low, like 2 TPS. Like if our numbers were instead of 80% occupancy, it was 75% occupancy and 4 nights on average, it would be 3 nights average. The order of the TPS is not going to change. It might be 3 TPS in the best case or 4 TPS, but the order is going to be in the single digit of TPS. Okay. So now these are the numbers, like 2 TPS is going to affect our choice of system design. Now this is what we have done for write. Booking TPS is 2 TPS. Now we also want to understand this from a read point of view, like how much times does a user access the hotel details and the room details. So again, some ballpark numbers suggest that there is a 10% funnel conversion. By funnel conversion, I mean when a user searches to book a hotel, followed by they opening the booking page, like they select a room and so on, they open the booking page, then 10% of the users will drop off from the booking page and ultimately only 10% out of them in all will create a booking. So let's say there were 100 users. They want to create a booking, like they want to reserve a hotel. Out of them, 10% will drop off. Okay, only 10% will succeed. My bad. 90% will drop off. And 10% will only create a booking order. So this means out of 100 people, only 10 people will create a booking order. And out of these 10 people, again 90% will drop off. And one person would be able to create a booking. So 1% is the conversion rate. So when a person wants to fetch hotel details and room details, this number is going to be 100 times the TPS of booking, which is 2. So in this case, it will be 200 QPS. Okay. Now the QPS for order creation would hence be 20 TPS. Now as per our understanding, since 90% of them drop off, out of the 20 bookings that are created, only 2 will succeed and rest 18 will be cancelled. So let's write that as well, like create an order. Okay, create order will have 20 TPS. Now we will see how this is influencing our database choice and system design in future, but we'll keep these numbers for that time being. Now we want to create the APIs. Okay, so from our discussions, we have realized that we can classify the APIs into broadly 4 categories: the hotel APIs, the room APIs, the booking APIs to create a booking and to fetch a booking, and then the search API to search for different hotels for our query. Now, for the hotel APIs, some APIs will only be authorized for the admin of the hotel, and some APIs will only be authorized for a logged in user. Now, let's start with the hotel APIs. Now, normal nomenclature for the APIs is CRUD. Okay, what does CRUD stand for? Now, if you remember, I wrote some verbs before our functional requirements. So C stands for create, R stands for read, which is the get part, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. Now for the hotel APIs, all the 4 types of APIs will be there. We want to create a hotel, which will be using the post verb, post v1/hotels. So this will add a hotel to the database. Similarly, for read, update and delete, there will be different verbs. For read, there will be get, and we will be using the hotel ID for this. And for update, there will be a put verb, and similarly for delete as well. Okay, so I'm not going to write all of these details repeatedly. Now another thing which we can do with get is there can be 2 types of get calls, like there can be 2 types of read. Either we are trying to get one particular hotel based on the hotel ID, or it can be all the hotels for some use case, maybe for maintenance, maybe for analysis, we don't know. But we also need to make that API available. It might not be exposed to the users or the admin, but it can be used internally for some purpose. So in that case, we will also have a get call for hotels without any filter. Okay. Now this is V1 in case someone is confused. V1 stands for version 1. Whenever we are designing some system, this is a very common API prefix, API nomenclature to start the API with V1. And whatever we will expose outside, like for example, it's Airbnb, then it would be airbnb.com/hotels/ something like that. So that V1 is a representation of the domain name over here. Now for the room APIs also, it will be the same thing. We will have a create room, read room, update room, and delete room. Now read in both the cases will only be for the users, and create, update, and delete, they will be provided only to the admins. So we need the authorization in place to ensure that a normal user is not able to create, update, or delete those details, and an admin, I mean, it's fine if the admin is able to read the hotel details. So admin, it should be okay for the admin to get those details, but an admin of a particular hotel should not be able to access or update the details of other hotels. So that type of authentication is also important. Now for booking APIs, we should be able to create booking, obviously. Now when a person clicks on select room or book, for example, okay, let's say there is a booking page where there is a room. Okay, R1 room is there, R2 room is there, and on the right there is a select room button. Now, usually, like I think I'm trying to follow the page design of booking.com. I'm not too sure, but they have the reserve button over there. Okay, so that also creates a booking order. We are not making the payment right now. We are just creating a booking order in our database. So that's what is done for the booking APIs. That can be done by the user over here. Read also, it can be done by both the users and the admin, but depending upon the API, like a user can read based on the user ID, and the admin of a hotel can read based on the hotel ID of that particular hotel. Okay. Now delete we are not providing right now. Delete or update we are not providing right now because we discussed in our functional requirements that it will be an extended goal. Like if we want to, we can obviously extend it to those APIs, but for the minimum viable product, that is not necessary. Now, search API is a little different. We don't create, read, update, or delete in search. Search is a normal v1/search, and there will be a search payload associated with it that can contain a location, that can be any query. Okay, the search payload can contain any query. It can have different types of filters based on guest rating, hotel rating, or what the prices are, and so on. Okay, so I'm not going to write all of those details. Like, it depends on your use case, what all filters you want to provide as a designer of the system. Now let's take a look at, I know my handwriting is not good, and that's why. Let's take a look at all the APIs under the same hood so that we have a clarity of what we are doing in our system. Okay, so as mentioned, for the hotel APIs, based on the hotel ID, we have read, update, delete, and create is a generic API. The hotel ID is created by the system itself whenever a create order is placed. So now if you carefully notice, in the room APIs, there are two types of GET calls. The first one being a GET call based on a particular room type ID, and the second one being a list call actually. So based on the hotel ID, all the rooms in the particular hotel should be listed to the user. Now, if you carefully notice, there are, like, instead of room ID, we are using room type ID. Okay, why is that so? Because when we are booking a particular hotel, we don't choose that, hey, book a room, like book room number 109 for me. Okay, that is done at the time of check-in based on what all different rooms are available based on your check-in order. Like if someone comes before you and having the same type of room, for example, pool facing, okay, so they will be assigned the first room and then you will be assigned another room. There are no fixed rooms before you check in. So what we will do is we will have a room type ID instead of a room ID, and based on that we will have our update calls, get calls, and so on. Okay, now for the bookings also, as I mentioned before, the create API, the post API is meant for the end user, and we have 3 IDs by which we can fetch the bookings. The first one being the booking ID. If you are looking for a particular booking, let's say you have all the bookings listed for you for a particular user and you want to check the details of a particular booking that you have taken in the past or possibly in the future as well. So that is what the booking ID is for. Now, if you want to list all the bookings done by a user, then you will use a user ID, and the admin will use a hotel ID to get all the bookings by the hotel ID. And as we discussed, for the search, there will only be a search query associated with some filters. Now, these are the APIs. Now, the next task for us is to decide what database we want to go ahead with. Now, let's just recollect what all different requirements are there for us. We have a low write QPS. So that means that we are not bounded to use a NoSQL database like we had to do in Uber. And okay, let's keep a note of that. Write QPS is low. It was 2 TPS if I remember correctly. And this gives us a flexibility that if we want to go ahead with a SQL database, we can go ahead with it. Okay, so NoSQL is not needed. It's not necessary. NoSQL is not needed. Now, if you carefully notice, we talked about hotels, rooms, bookings, user ID, and so on. Now, all of these entities are somewhere related to each other. Like the room table would somewhere be related to the hotel table. The booking table will be related to the user table, hotel table, and the room table, and so on. So in that sense, there is a modeling of a database which we can use, and for that purpose, we can use a SQL database. So our entities can be modeled in SQL in a better way. Okay, there are foreign keys associated, so it helps us maintain a referential integrity. We can also, in SQL, we have something known as ACID properties. A stands for atomicity. Okay, the transactions are atomic. C stands for consistency, which is one of our requirements for this system design. I stands for isolation, and D stands for durability. Now, for our use case, it is very important that two people don't book the same room. If one room is only available, then we don't double book it, and the consistency is maintained. For example, out of the two users, only one user should be able to book that room, and so on. So our transactions need to be atomic for that purpose, and in order to be consistent, it should be reflected on the admin side whenever a room is booked. Okay, so strong consistency is also important, and our operations should be atomic so that double booking, double charging, all of those issues don't happen. So this luxury is provided to us by a SQL database. So based on all of these options that we have looked so far, it seems that SQL at the moment is the best choice for us. We can revisit the design in future if we want a particular database to be NoSQL or a time series database and so on. It's not just SQL and NoSQL, there are various other types of databases which we can use, and we will encounter that in this particular system design tutorial, where we will choose some other type of database for a particular use case. Okay, but now for the time being, we can model the current data, hotels, rooms, users, and bookings in a SQL database. All right. So now let's create a high level ER diagram. What ER stands for? It's entity relationship, where we will try to create the schema of some of the databases and then check how they are related to each other. Now, for example, let's just start with a hotel table. So there will be hotel ID, obviously, and then there will be some other details like country, latitude, longitude, and so on. But the main part about this is the primary key, which is the hotel ID. Now in the room table, okay, if you remember, we are not storing it by the room ID, rather we are storing it by the room type ID. So obviously hotel ID is important because one room type ID will be associated to a particular hotel ID. Then we will obviously have a room type ID. Then we will have some other information like what's the floor, what's the number, and so on. And we will also have the rate of the room, which is important for the booking part. And we can also store the inventory that on this particular date, this many number of rooms are available. But maybe that will bloat our database and we can store it in a different inventory table. So for example, if I store inventory of a room or of a room type in the same table as the room table, then it will have a lots of entries for each of the dates, which we don't want to. We want to keep our room table of a limited size, and instead we can create an inventory table for this purpose. All right, so there will be an inventory table which will we will have the hotel ID, we will have the same primary keys as the room table, room type ID will be there, and then we will have a date, because an inventory is associated with a particular date, like how many rooms of presidential suite are available in, let's say, Los Angeles Marriott. I'm not sure if there exists a Marriott hotel for that, but just an example that for this particular room type ID, presidential suite or some queen suite or something like that, how many rooms are available. So rooms available, okay, and we also need to store the total inventory, because then it will assist our booking service that how many more users can book a room of a particular type on this particular date. So total rooms is also important. Now I think these 5 fields are important. We can add a lot more fields based on the use case, but to get started with, these 5 fields are at most important to us. Then we will obviously have a user table. I'm not drawing it because it would be quite self-explanatory. But okay, let's just draw it. Let's not miss out on anything at all. So the guest will have a user ID. There will be some first name or last name or both of them, email, and so on. And there can be some other fields if we want to store the location, to suggest something in the future that, hey, a Marriott hotel has like it's been launched in a city near you or something like that. Maybe the location can also be important. Now the important table or the meaty table will be the bookings table. Okay. Now what this booking table will contain, obviously the primary key will be the booking ID. Then associated with each booking would be a user ID because one guest would book it. Now a booking ID is related to a particular room type ID. And this room will be in a hotel. So we will store a hotel ID as well. And we will also have check-in dates and check-out dates. Check-in, check-out. And we also need to store the status of a booking. Now we will talk about this in detail when we are designing the service for booking. Why the status is important, what is the relevance of the status, and so on. But if you notice, one thing is missing out of, like in this booking table, is the payment ID, because associated with each booking there should be a payment corresponding to it. If it has been cancelled, it's a different scenario, but if it is a successful booking, then a payment ID is important. So we should also have a payment ID, and corresponding to the payment ID, obviously this is a foreign key, so we should have a payment table as well, which will be created by our payment gateway service. Okay, so there will be an ID, there will be some other details like amount and so on. Okay, there can be a payment status as well if we want to keep it, like success or fail can be two categories of payment status. Now let's have a holistic look at what the ER diagram will actually look like. Now as suggested, like we will have a hotel table which will be associated to the room table by a foreign key relationship, and like there is inventory table, booking table. Let's see if I have not missed out anything. Yeah, in the booking table, if you notice, we also need to keep a track of how many rooms are booked for that particular booking. Okay, it's not always that only one room is booked. One booking can correspond to 2 rooms, 3 rooms, and so on as well. All right. So I think rest of the other details are similar as we discussed earlier. And you can just take a pause in the video at this moment to realize how the tables are related to each other and how SQL makes it so beautiful for the entities to be related with each other, maintaining the referential integrity, consistency, and atomicity, and so on. For example, there is some change in the payment, it is going to affect our booking table as well. So all of these things are easy to process because of a SQL database. Now, obviously, the NoSQL databases have also improved a lot in recent time, but based on our use case, as I told, that the write QPS is quite low. We need the transactions to be atomic. We need the consistent updates. And for all of those reasons, SQL is a good choice. Now, if someone asks you a question that, hey Anshul, like you have kept the rate of the room inside the room table, but we have usually noticed that on festivals, near long weekends and so on, the rate of the rooms increase. So how would you model that? Okay, so that is a very important question, that how, like first question is whether we want the admin to update the rate of the hotels on particular dates or not. Okay, so for a minimum viable product, we can go ahead with a no answer, but let's brainstorm a little bit on how we can allow the admin to update the rates of the hotel. So what we can do is, in the room table, we can also add, like there is rate already there. We can also add a date column, and associated with a date column, there will be a particular rate. But if you notice, for example, let's allow the admin to update rates for 1 year in advance. Okay, I think 1 year is too much. We can allow the admin to update rates for 1 month in advance. I mean, there would be some, for the booking purpose, you can book 1 year in advance, but we only allow the admin to update the rates for, let's say, 1 month in advance. So in the room table, corresponding to a room type ID, so let's say in, like we check that there are 10K hotels. Now for each hotel, there are 100 rooms, but these are not like, in the room table we are not storing individual rooms. Okay, we are storing the room type ID. So at max there would be 4 to 5 categories of rooms. Just for a buffer we can store 10 rooms. Okay, now corresponding to each of the 10 rooms, if we want to store for 30 days the rate, then instead of 10 to the power 5 entries in the room table, we are increasing the capacity to 3 into the 10, like 3 million. Okay, 3 into 10 to the power 6. Now this goes against the principles of database normalization. So the ideal thing would be to, like, for example, we did the same thing for inventory as well. Okay, for each date we don't want to store the inventory in the room table along with the room. We created a new table for that. So in the same way, what we can do is we can create another rate table as well. So what the rate table will store is, for each hotel ID and room type ID, there will be a rate for a particular date. It sounds rhyming, isn't it? So yes, in this way we can store the rates for some days in advance. We can allow the admin to update rates for some days in advance. And let's see how the ER diagram is updated now. So as you can notice, the rate table is also associated with the room table. And this is how, with dynamic pricing coming into the picture, we can add another table. We can normalize the database by keeping apart the rate table and the inventory table from the room table. So just for you, for bookkeeping purpose, for database normalization, from the room table, we have forked out two different rooms, which is the inventory table and the rate table, because then we would be storing a lot of redundant data which is not required, like hotel ID, room type ID, floor, name of the room, and some of the other details related to the room will unnecessarily be copied in the rate table and the inventory table as well. So let's just associate them by the primary key, and let's just store only the information which is useful. Okay, so now this is how our ER diagram is modeled. So the next step would be coming to the high level design, and we will first get started with the hotel service. Now it is important whenever we are designing a service to set the correct expectations. Now what does the hotel service do? Now at the moment I am allowing the hotel service only for the admins, and the admins can add a new hotel through this service. They can add a new room. They can also update the details of the hotel and room, and also, like, whatever information related to the hotel needs to be added to our system, that will happen to the hotel service. It can be the rates, it can be like any XYZ thing. You want to add photos, anything at all, it will happen through the hotel service, and only the admin will have access to it. Now, you will be asking me why only admins? Like, let's say a user wants to search some hotels. Cannot we allow the users also to have access to this particular service? Now, one of the reasons why I want only the admins to have access to this is authorization becomes much simpler, because the service is exposed only to the admins. We won't even expose the APIs of, like, through the hotel service. That acts as an encapsulation for us. It protects those APIs. Okay, now I will also discuss in detail how we are going to search for the hotels and the rooms, but let's get started first with the hotel service. And what we will allow them is create, update, or delete any information related to the hotel or rooms. Okay, so we know the relevant APIs which will be exposed. We won't expose the GET APIs at the moment. The admins can have access to it, but I mean, it's just a matter of preference. There is no meaning of admins having an access to the GET APIs for the hotels and like the rooms and so on. So our hotel service will expose those APIs. Now we decided earlier that we will go ahead with a SQL database. So we will store all of these details in a SQL cluster. Okay. Now we can have a master slave architecture wherein there is a master database. Okay. And then there are some slave databases as well. So in case the master database goes down or is corrupted, we can replicate the data from the slave database and make it consistent to the master database. Now it is important to understand what all different tables will be stored in the SQL cluster. So we'll start with the hotel table. We will also store the room table. We also need to store the rates, and we can possibly store the inventory as well. But one issue over here is that we are not going to make the bookings via the hotel service, since this is accessible only to the admins, and hence we might want to avoid storing the inventory, because then it won't be consistent over here. We can store the inventory in some other database for the booking service, and in that we'll pass on the information whenever an update is made. For example, let's say a room is created and the admin will create a room with a particular room type with some capacity, with some total inventory. So we will create an entry for that in the inventory table at that particular time and store it in a separate SQL cluster, which is meant for our booking service. Okay. So now this is the use case for our hotel service. We can revisit the hotel service in case there are some changes to it as we discuss in the future. But some of the APIs which we have catered over here, let's just mark them completed. Okay. Now we have completed creation of hotels, updation of hotels, deletion of hotels, and the same for rooms as well. Okay. Now the get hotels and get rooms will be covered by our search service, because that is where we are using it. We are obviously not going to use it in our booking service because that is strictly related to all the booking related information. And fetch APIs for all the different bookings based on a booking ID, a user ID, or the hotel ID, that can be covered by a different booking management service or something of that sort. We can talk about that when we are talking about the booking service in detail, whether we want to fork two different services, a booking services which is restricted to creating the bookings and managing them for a user, and the booking management service which only operates on the read APIs of the bookings, or we want to club them both together. And this search API will be dedicated for our search service only. So let's design our search service now. Now this service will only be exposed to the users. I mean, the admins can also access it, but they can do it via their user accounts as well. So let's restrict the search service to only the users. Now what this search service handles is the search request. Like whenever you open any platform like Airbnb, Booking.com, Make My Trip, and so on, you type in some keywords like this particular location, you add in the check-in dates, check-out dates, and then try to search for whatever hotels are there. Okay, so it helps with the search experience of the user. Okay, now I mean, my choice of database for this particular service would be an Elasticsearch cluster. Now, I mean, I will tell you why an Elasticsearch cluster is helpful for us. So, Elasticsearch cluster. Now, why is it helpful now? I mean, why can't we use the SQL database that we created in the hotel service? Why can't we use it directly? Now, one simple reason is, let's say, for example, if I wanted to book a hotel in Chikmagalur, for example. Okay. Now it is possible that I might make a typo. I don't know the exact name. I might don't know the exact spelling of that particular location, or I am not aware what the exact spelling of the hotel is. Okay. So in that scenario, Elasticsearch cluster helps us with fuzzy searching. Okay. And also, like, Elasticsearch is meant for such use cases, fuzzy search, wildcards based on different types of filters, and so on. It is optimized to help us have low latency search experiences. So we will use a Elasticsearch cluster. And next question would be, how does the Elasticsearch cluster know what all hotels are there, what all different rooms are there in a hotel, and so on? So we can use a Kafka queue for this purpose. Okay. Now we can create a Kafka queue, And how will the Kafka queue get the data? It will get the data whenever the hotel service receives any type of update. It can be a create, it can be update, or it can be delete. Okay, we will get those updates from the hotel service, and there will be a search consumer sitting in front of the Kafka and like between Elasticsearch and Kafka to consume those topics. There will be a search consumer which will get those messages, which will get those payloads meant for Elasticsearch. It will consume those and store it in the Elasticsearch cluster. Now, to explain what Kafka is in a little detail. So Kafka is, you can assume it's a kind of infrastructure queue, or it's a data structure wherein some publishers or some producers create a type of payload for a particular topic. Okay, so there will be some producers which will create a payload for a particular topic. Now, there will be some consumer sitting on the other side of the queue which will listen to those topics, and whenever a message for that topic comes in, they can consume it as and when they want to. Alright, so in this case, for the search consumer, like the hotel service can publish some messages like, hey, a new room has been added to this particular hotel, and the search consumer will consume it and make corresponding changes in our Elasticsearch cluster. Now, other important thing over here is addition of a cache, because we observed that the search had quite a high QPS. So some of the static information like the hotel photos, room photos, they can be stored in the CDN. Okay, so the CDN is content delivery network. We can, whenever an update is made through the hotel service, we can add the hotel rooms, we can add the room photos, hotel photos, and so on in the CDN, which is geographically distributed, and the search service can access that static data from the CDN itself to reduce the latency. Okay, so if I want to make some changes to the hotel service can make some writes to the CDN for some sort of static data like hotel photos, room photos, and some other static data if it is available. All right, I think this defines our search service. We can revisit the service in case, like, for example, right now we revisited the hotel service, right? So down the lane in future, if there are some changes which are important to be made in search service, we will revisit it and we will make necessary changes over there. Now, here comes a very important part, which is the booking service. Okay, now this is the meat, this is the flesh of the entire system, that how a user is able to create a booking and complete it. So we need to keep the booking table in mind, like what all different tables it needs to access. So in order to complete a booking, what do we need? We need the inventory table to check whether the rooms are available or not, right? Then we also need the bookings table in order to create the booking. Now, if I remember correctly, I think we missed out a crucial piece in our search service. We also need access to the rate table. Okay, so whenever you search for any hotel, any room, you realize that there is a rate associated with it as well, right? So I am assuming that whenever some changes are made to the rate, for example, like for dynamic pricing feature, whenever the user makes in some changes, our search consumer can listen to those changes and make necessary updates in our Elasticsearch cluster. But in this case of booking service, how do we know what the rates are? Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind is we can have a different rate listener, rate consumer, which can listen to a specific topic related to the rates. Okay, so we will have a listener, we will have a consumer in front of Kafka for this as well, rate consumer, and this will store the rates of a hotel for a particular room on a particular date. Like it will store the entire rate table in this rate SQL cluster. All right, so now let's create our booking service. So So this service, it needs access to inventory booking table as well. So this is our booking service. How does it get the necessary information? We can have a SQL cluster for inventory and booking as well. Now you might be wondering why we are having two separate clusters for inventory booking and rate SQL, right? So now it just came to my notice that we are using rate for search service and we are using rate for booking service as well. So what we can do is we can expose the rate SQL cluster through a rate service, and both of them can be used by the booking service as well as the search service. So we can have similarly, like we will just copy paste this thing, rate consumer is there, which will put all the data in the rate SQL cluster, and this will be exposed by a rate service, and this service will be fetched by the search service directly. Okay, we don't need to perform any search criteria, like we don't need to exploit the services of Elasticsearch for the rate service. Like we can fetch the data from the Elasticsearch, and based on whatever data is fetched, we can query the rate service and get the rates for those particular rooms on that particular date. Now we can reuse the same service, like we don't need to create two different rate consumers, rate services, and so on. Again, I am showing exemplary display of my drawing skills. But yeah, we will reuse this rate service, and that will be used by the booking service itself when we want to do the payment. Now, I realize that we also need to create a payment service in order to facilitate the payment. Now, this payment service will be interacting, like it will be a payment gateway. It can be Razorpay, it can be PayU, or any such service. We don't need to create our own payment service. We can use the payment gateways already available, and they will be performing all the coordination with the user bank and the hotel bank and so on. All the communications will be abstracted to us. So we'll just use a payment service to facilitate the payment for us. Now, this is what probably the booking service will look like. Okay, now the inventory data also, whenever a room is created, we can add the inventory table, like we can add the corresponding entry in the booking SQL cluster. This is our booking SQL DB. So whenever, let's say, a room is added, we can create a corresponding entry in the inventory table for that particular room ID, and like let's say if a hotel is created, we can do the same for that as well. So we can use the same consumers like we used for search consumer. We can use a booking consumer. I don't think if it is necessary or not, but we might need a consumer to listen to those changes as well. Now let's understand the booking flow in detail to manage how all of these services interact with each other. Okay, so now the first thing that the user will do, like whenever the room details are provided, he or she will click on the book room button. Now, when the person clicks on a book room, there will, like, a timer will start, which we discussed earlier, that there can be a 15 minute allowance or a 10-minute allowance for the payment to be successful in that time. Otherwise, the booking will be cancelled. So whenever the user clicks on book room, what we will do is we will check in the inventory table. Okay, let's just create the inventory table as well. There will be a date column, there will be available column, and there will obviously be room type ID. Okay, I'm just referring here it with room ID, but it actually means room type ID. So whenever a user clicks on the book room button, the first thing that will happen is it will create an entry in the booking table. First of all, that this is the user ID on this particular check-in date, checkout date. For this many number of users, a booking order is created. And remember, we talked about the booking status. So now let's revisit that part. Let's talk about that in detail. Now this is the booking status. It can be reserved. It can be booked. It can be cancelled. in case the payment fails or some issue happens. Like let's say the 15-minute timer went up and the user still has not completed payment, then it can be marked cancelled as well. Or it can be completed. Completed means like the person has visited the hotel and the checkout date is complete. So at the time of checkout, the receptionist can like close the booking and it will be marked as completed. So I think these 4 statuses are sufficient for us to visualize how our booking flow will look like. So whenever the user clicks on book room, reserved will be marked, like the status will be marked reserved and all the details will be added. Check-in date, checkout date, number of rooms, user ID, room ID, hotel ID, and so on. Okay, now the status at this moment, the status will be marked as reserved. So when the person clicks on book room, status reserved, and booking table entry is created. Now one important step which should come before we add an entry to the booking table, which is to check the inventory table. I mean, you would book only if the inventory is available, right? No point in marking the book reserved if there are no rooms available at all. So I think this should be marked as number 3. And I mean, sorry for the reordering, but in the second step, we should first check the inventory table. Let's say the user wants to book 2 rooms for 3 days, like the check-in date and checkout dates are given. So the server needs to check for all these 3 dates, are 2 rooms available for a particular type? If yes, then we go ahead and create the booking row in the booking table and we also start the timer. If not, then we return to the user that this is not possible. I mean, we won't do anything in the booking table at all. Okay, so check the inventory table, then mark the status reserved if it succeeds. If not, then we return itself and we create an entry in the booking table. The 4th step would be to make the payment. Okay. Now there are 2 options over here. I mean, it's not in our hands. Either you can make like a successful payment if it is successful. Now you must also remember we also had a status associated with the payment table. So if it is successful, then we tell the booking table that you can mark the booking as booked. Okay. And if it fails, for example, if it has failed, one second, if it is successful, we'll mark the status as booked. And if it has failed, then we'll mark the status of booking as cancelled. Now, one important thing is whenever we are checking the inventory and creating an entry in the booking table, we should reduce the inventory as well. So that if 2 people are trying to book a particular room type on the same dates, then there is no inconsistency. Okay, so I think after 2, there will be a 2- part as well, which I have missed, which should be check inventory and reduce inventory. Now, we will reduce the inventory only if the rooms are available. If the rooms are not available, again, the same thing, like we return the error to the user that please book for some other dates. Now, if the booking has been cancelled for any XYZ reason, okay, it can be bank servers are down, it can be the payment gateway has crashed, or it can either be that the payment is not made in the designated 15 minutes time. What we will do is, we will obviously mark the booking status cancelled and we will also increment the inventory because we need to restore it to the previous version, right? Increment inventory. Because we want to ensure a consistent environment for the users. Let's say only one room was available. A user is trying to book. Their booking gets cancelled, like their payment gets cancelled for any reason. The inventory should be restored so that other users can book it now. Or if the timer goes up, then we should be allowed to book it once again. Like another user should be allowed to book it, or the same user can also book it. Now, how do we manage this payment along with the timer that is there, let's say 15 minutes? Okay, I think we need to remove some part of this in order to facilitate that explanation. All right. So whenever, like after step 3, the status is marked reserved and the entry is made in the booking table, our timer starts. So what our booking server can do is it can add a message in a Redis cluster. Now I will also tell why Redis cluster, but like step by step. Okay. So the first step for us would be to use a Redis cluster and add a payload corresponding to that booking, that the expiry of that particular payload should be, let's say 15 minutes. Okay. So once 15 minutes are over, then this particular payload will be evicted from the cache. Now, once it is evicted, we can check if the booking is not successful, we will mark it cancelled because our timer is up, right? And we will check if the booking is successful, then we can mark it booked. But there is one inconsistency. I mean, there can be a race condition, okay, between our cache and the payment service. Now, when the cache timer is up and the message is evicted, if the payment is cancelled, we are fine. If the payment is successful, we are also fine. But if it is the other way around, okay, let's say the payment is successful. In this case, the timer is still going on. I mean, in the Redis cluster, the payload still exists. So in case the booking is successful, for the optimization purpose, what we can do is we can evict that message from the Redis cluster and tell you are no longer required and get rid of it. In case it has failed before the 15-minute timing, the payment has failed before 15-minute timing, we can do the same thing. We can mark the booking as cancelled. We can evict from the Redis cluster as well. So this is how we can manage the 15-minute timer along with the payment service. Okay, so now we have covered the booking flow, how we will affect the inventory, when the inventory will be decremented, when the inventory will be incremented in case of cancellations, and how does the payment service affect our booking tables and the booking status. All right, now we come to okay, now if we revisit the APIs, we have covered a part of the APIs now. Let's mark them completed. We have fetched the hotel details, we have fetched the room details as well. We have created the booking as well, and we have also implemented our search API. Now the only API which we are left to implement is the get APIs for our bookings. Now someone might argue that, okay, we are storing the booking database in the booking SQL DB. So why not use the same service to fetch the bookings from that particular cluster itself? Now it's about a preference. Okay, in system design, there are trade-offs, but there are no rights and wrongs. Obviously, there will be some implications on choosing to go ahead with two different services or deciding to go ahead with one service only. But I feel more comfortable allowing the booking service only for the write operations of the booking and leaving the booking management service for the read operations. Again, that's a matter of personal choice. You can use the booking service as well. There is nothing wrong in it. But I will let you know why my personal choice has some reason associated with it. So we will use a booking management service for reading the bookings. Okay. And we will use this booking management service for that purpose. Okay, now a question would come up, if we are using a different service, do we use a different SQL cluster as well? Because that usually is the pattern of any microservice architecture, that all the services interact with their own clusters. But now, I mean, I would like to go ahead with a hybrid approach because we don't need to create another copy of the bookings table for this purpose. We can use the same bookings table as well. Okay, so I will use the same booking SQL cluster which we had created for our previous service. I mean, some microservice architecture gurus might not like this approach, but I think it's again about a personal preference, so it's all right. So we are using the same cluster, and we can easily facilitate the fetch from the cluster which we had created for the booking service. Now, here's another catch. The same cluster is used for writes, which is of the order of 2 QPS. And if I remember correctly, the order of booking creation, okay, it was 20 QPS or something like that. 20 TPS was the order. We are also facilitating the fetch APIs or the get APIs from the same SQL cluster, which can burden the database. So what we can do is we can use a Redis cluster. Like we were in fact using the Redis cluster to facilitate the 15-minute counter for our payments. We can use the same Redis cluster over here as well, right? So whenever a user or an admin wants to fetch particular booking or bookings, it can be for a particular date, it can be for a particular user, or it can be for a particular hotel. Okay, they can first check in the Redis cluster if it's available or not, and if it's not available, then they can fetch it from the SQL database, and then it can be added to our Redis cluster for future use. Now, an interesting thing to note over here is along the time a lot of bookings will be made. Okay, if we look at the future growth, it will linearly increase or it will exponentially increase. Okay, this SQL database is always going to be increasing with time. So let's just make some computations. Okay, there are 2 TPS bookings created, followed by 10 to the power 5, if I'm not wrong, seconds in a day. And let's just have a look in 100 days how many bookings are created. So this will be of the order 2 into 10 to the power 7. Now in 100 days, it's 2 into 10 to the power 7. In 1 year, this will become 6. And in many such years, obviously, as more hotels are added, more rooms are added, the number of bookings will increase. My bad, this is 20 QPS, so that this will be 6 into 10 to the power 8. So already in just 100 days, we are creating orders in the order of 1 billion. Now, one important thing is we don't need to keep all the bookings in the booking SQL cluster itself. Okay, whenever a booking is complete, okay, whenever a booking is old, it is stale, we can move it to a NoSQL cluster, NoSQL database like Cassandra, which is meant to store such immense volume of data. So instead of fetching it directly from the booking cluster, we can use an archival service that whenever a booking is completed, whenever the receptionist or someone from the admin side, they say that, okay, this booking is marked as complete. So then at that time, from the SQL database of booking cluster, we can move it via an archival service to the Cassandra cluster, or we can also run a cron job on a regular basis, on a daily basis, that, hey, give me all the bookings which have been completed today. So we will be using a Cassandra cluster with an archival service. So whenever a booking is completed, the archival service duty is to fetch the bookings which are completed from the SQL cluster and dump them into the Cassandra cluster. Okay, so for the booking management service, if it is a live booking, if it is a future booking or a current booking, then only we irritate the booking SQL cluster and the Redis cluster for that booking. For all the old bookings, we use the Cassandra cluster in order to reduce the load on our SQL database. So this is how, like, this is the reason why I preferred having a separate booking management service, because it is interacting with different types of databases as compared to our booking service. And hence, I mean, I still go ahead strongly with my choice of creating a separate booking management service. But if you feel you can go ahead and maintain a complex interaction between different types of Redis cluster, booking SQL cluster, Cassandra cluster, archival service, and all of that with the booking service itself, there is no harm in that. I mean, it all boils down to a person's capacity and the choice. Now, I mean, before I summarize how all the services interact with each other, I want to dig deep into some of the common issues which can happen, because we talked about highly concurrent what happens if two users try to access the same hotel room, try to book it on the same time. Okay, so the first use case that I want to cover is frustrated user. Okay, a user like me. So for example, I click on the book button. I click on a book button and then it doesn't redirect me to the payment page. Now, being a frustrated person, I will try to click on the book button again and again till it redirects me to the payment page. Now, the issue, what happens is, as we talked earlier about the booking flow, right? If the inventory is available, it will try to double book. Okay, it will try to create multiple entries for the same user and the same check-in dates, which is not the intended behavior for us. Okay, so how should we tackle with such a use case? All right, let's just create a timeline for this. This is a user at time T1. They click on the button for the first time. So let's say a booking ID is created, like a row in the booking table is created because the inventory is available. Let's say we have infinite inventory for the time being. So let's say we create room with 111 booking ID. Like let's say we create a row in the booking table with 111 ID. Now at T2, the user again clicks on the book button being frustrated. It will again create another booking ID, but it will correspond to the same check-in dates, checkout dates, same number of rooms, same user ID, same room type ID, and same hotel ID. Now we don't want to create multiple entries because it will lead. Now let's say there were 2 rooms available. The user clicked on it twice. Now the inventory has reduced to 0. So some other user who wants to try and book the room, they will either need to wait for 10 to 15 minutes when the booking order becomes stale and it's cancelled after the TTL eviction from the Redis cache that we talked about. After that only they will be able to book. So we don't want such a use case to happen. We want to create only one booking order corresponding to a user. Now there are 2 ways in which we can tackle this. The first way is in the client side. Like in the front end, whenever the book button is clicked, we can gray it. Okay, we can just gray it out so that the person is not able to click it again. We can disable it. Okay, after one click is done. The second way in which we can tackle this is having an idempotent API. Now this is again a tech jargon and I will explain what idempotent API means. Idempotent API means for the same request, if it is hit multiple times to the server, the same response is received. Okay. If we send R1 to the server, it will return R2. If we send on R1 again and again, we'll keep on returning R2 to the user. We won't create a new response. Okay. So now how we can manage this? We can manage this by creating a hash of a request. So we have some values associated with our booking order, like hotel ID is there, room ID is there, number of rooms are there, user ID is there, check-in date, checkout date, and so on. We can use all of these details to create a hash so that now when the same user tries to click on book button once again, our server will realize that all of these details are the same and it creates the same booking ID. Now the hash of these details are used to create the booking ID. Now this will always be unique if the person is trying to do 2 different types of bookings. And since a booking ID is already created, when the first time the user clicks on the book button, there will be, let's say for this particular hash, there is a booking ID 111. Okay. Now when the person tries to click on the book button once again, it will have the same entries to the hash function and will again create 111 as the booking ID. But the booking table checks that, okay, 111 already exists, so it doesn't add another row with the same booking ID again. So in this way, we can use an idempotent API using booking ID as an idempotent key. So in this case, let's use a different color. Booking ID becomes our idempotency key. Okay, so now in this way, through front end and through back end, from the client side and server side, we can handle a use case of frustrated user. Now there is a very important use case where 2 users are trying to book the same room and we want the inventory to be consistent. Okay, so let's say the inventory right now, it is 100 rooms. Okay, like whatever available rooms are. So the inventory is 100. Now let's say user 1 tries to read this. User 1, we will use a different color for user 2. User 2 also reads it. Now this is the timeline. Okay. User 2 reads it at some different time after the user 1 reads it. But since the user 1 has still not completed the booking, or still has not, like for example, the user has clicked on the book button right now. Okay, at this timestamp, the user clicked on book button. But still the commit corresponding to that book button click has not happened. We have not yet decremented from the inventory table. Both the users are trying to concurrently access it and trying to create a booking order. So we have still not reduced the number of available rooms and committed it to our database. And at the same time, before the commit has happened, user 2 also tries to read it. So user 2 also clicks on the book button and they read that 100 rooms are available. User 1 also reads that 100 rooms are available. Now, at some time down the lane in future, what user 1 will do is, it will try to create a booking order. It will try to decrement this number to 99 and it will try to commit this entry into the database. So at this time, 99, like the inventory reduces from 100 to 99. Now, it can happen that the user 2 completes the transaction before the user 1. Okay, because since both the transactions are isolated, because it's a SQL database, both the transactions will be isolated and they won't affect each other. Now the user 2 also decrements the number to 99 and they also write it at some timestamp before the user 1 writes it. Now what happens unfortunately is, at the end of this timeline, the inventory of that particular room type for that particular date is still 99 when it should have been 98. Now this is an inconsistent experience and this will lead to double bookings of the same type of room. Now at this stage it's fine, I mean rooms are available and 2 users can book it, it's all right. But imagine if only 1 room was available. Okay, now instead of 10, this was 1. Now 2 people have booked the room and this number has reduced to 0 now. Now this creates an issue because only 1 room was available and we have 2 people have got the booking confirmation that both of their rooms have been booked. Now in order to mitigate this concurrency issue, this inconsistent experience, you must have heard about locking. If not, don't worry, I'm going to talk about that in brief, like what all different locking mechanisms we can use in order to avoid such inconsistent experiences. So the first way to tackle this issue is pessimistic locking. Okay, what pessimistic locking means is that, let's try to recreate the timeline. Okay, and now at this moment, let's go ahead with only 1 room available so that we understand the criticality of this concurrent issue. So now at this timeline, the transaction begins. The user 1 clicks on the book button. Okay, now when the user 2, now this is user 1 and this is user 2. Now when the user 1 clicks on the book button, what they will do is they will try to lock that particular entry in the inventory table. Okay, user 2 cannot access it until the transaction is complete. All right, so this inventory table is booked or it's logged for that particular time, and when the transaction ends, that the inventory is reduced from 1 to 0. The room has been booked corresponding to the user 1, and let's say if user 2 clicked on the book button at some moment after the user 1 clicked on the book button but before the transaction has ended, it will realize that that particular row, both are trying to book the same room type ID on the same check-in dates and checkout date combination. Okay, so it will try to, it will tell you in return that, hey, The row has been locked. Wait for some time until the lock is freed, and at that moment you can continue with your transaction. So at this moment, the lock is released. Okay. And unfortunately, user 2, like the transaction of user 2 realizes that the inventory is now 0. Okay, if you notice, the inventory has been updated to 0. No rooms are available now, and hence the server will try to, the SQL database will try to roll back the transaction and tell the user that no rooms are available. Please check for some other dates. So in this way, by pessimistic locking, we can try to block the row for some time until a transaction is committed, and then we only allow other concurrent users to access it. Now, one important issue with this is that the latency increases. Okay, if a lot of users are trying to access it, it will not be a good user experience because they are waiting for a long time for the transaction to get completed. But this is in fact beneficial when the data contention is high. Okay. In our use case, I mean, the booking QPS is not so high, it's just 2 TPS, so it's all right. But in case data contention is high, since we are serializing the updates, it is fine if multiple users are trying to access it at the same time. Okay, it's not creating, I mean, other than the latency part, it's not creating any inconsistency. So we are fine with the heavy data contention. So it's good on that part. Now, how you can implement it from a database side. So there is a SQL query for that. So you can implement pessimistic locking using this command, select for update. Okay, now update doesn't need to come in the second line. It's just that I didn't have space here. So select for update is the SQL query, which we can use to implement the pessimistic locking mechanism. So it will don't allow parallel, like concurrent writes to the same table at the same time. Whenever one row is read, it will create a lock. Only when the write is done, when the transaction is committed, we will free the lock and allow other user to read from it. So in this way, it will never allow concurrent writes and it will serialize it, and we will never experience an inconsistent behavior. Now, another way to go ahead with mitigating this concurrency issue or this inconsistency is optimistic locking. Now, optimistic locking can be implemented in a couple of ways. I'm going to cover the versioning way. Now, what this says is that corresponding to each row in our inventory table, there will be a version associated with it, like whatever version of that particular row it is. Inventory table, each row will have a version. They can be the same version, like each row, if they have been added for the first time, all of them will have version v1. Okay, it's all right. Now let's try to mimic the concurrency issue. Let me just get rid of it. Okay. Now let us try to recreate that timeline. Now only one room is available in the table. And let's say the version at that moment is something v. Okay. So now when the user 1, let's just create both the users, user 1 and user 2. Okay, when the user 1 reads the table, it will realize that the version is v, and on the same time, when the user 2 reads after some time, he or she will also realize that the version of the inventory row at that particular time is v, because since the commit has not happened, both of them will read the same version. Now let's say we will try to mimic the same behavior, that the user 2 tries to commit before the user 1. Now the role of the server is when they are committing, they will try to increment the version. Okay, so now the version is committed from v to v plus 1, and the inventory is obviously reduced from 1 to 0. So that has also happened when the first commit went off. Now when the user 1 tries to make a commit, they will realize that the current version number which is written in the inventory row, it is already v plus 1, and they were also trying to increment it to v plus 1, which is an inconsistent behavior. So they need to recreate that transaction, read v plus 1 again, and then write v plus 2. Okay, so this transaction will not be allowed, and hence user 1 will need to try and rebook it. Now this is not a beneficial approach if the data contention is high. If let's say 5 users are trying to access it at the same time, only one user will be successful. Rest all 4 users will receive a booking failed error or something like that. Okay. Now out of those 4 users, they again try to concurrently update the booking. In this case, it's 0. So obviously it will say that no rooms are available. But let's say there are 10 to 15 rooms available. So if users are trying to access it, 4 users, then only 1 will succeed and 3 will fail. And this will keep on repeating. And the last user, which will be able to book a room, he or she will had seen the failure for 4 times before the successful attempt. So if the data contention is high, this is not the approach to go ahead with. But in our case, as we know, right, that the data contention is no high, we have a 2 TPS contention. So in our case, since the data contention is not high, we can go ahead with the optimistic locking approach. Now another important thing as a part of SQL database is the provision of constraints. So whenever you try to write something into the inventory table, we can have a check condition. Okay, we can do this at the read time itself. We can put a check that rooms available or whatever the column name was. Okay, that should be greater than 0 in order to read it. If it's not greater than 0, we don't even need to read it and perform all the locking and versioning issues. Right? So if it is greater than 0, we are facilitated with the booking. If it is not greater than 0, if it's 0, then we cannot pursue with the booking. We need to change the dates or choose some other hotel and go ahead with the booking. So in this way, we can handle concurrency issues when one user keeps on booking again and again, or 2 different users are trying to book at the same time. Now let's take a look at the overall picture. Okay, I realized that my handwriting is not so good, so I created a beautiful diagram for you to understand this thing. Now, as you can clearly see, I mean, there is one part which I didn't cover, which was the Apache consumer. Okay. Now, this part is useful for analysis. Whenever there is an event created for any update, a booking is created, a room is added, the inventory is changed, or anything at all, we will create that entry, we will pass that message into the Kafka, and Apache Spark consumer will listen to all those entries, and it can be passed to a Hadoop cluster for big data analytics. And based on top of that, the hotels can take some decisions like they want to increase the price and so on. Like they can do lots of things. Now, if you realize, I was not so sure whether we want to have an inventory consumer or not, but I think it's the best way to go ahead with this is whenever a room is created, we should create an inventory, like we should have an inventory consumer in place so that an entry is created corresponding to it for all the dates in future in our booking SQL cluster. So now I think it is a pretty fair picture. You can like pause at this time and try to understand how search service and booking service try to use the same rate service, how we are trying to use the same booking SQL cluster for 2 different services like booking service and booking management service and so on. This gives us a good overall picture. Now only one part is left. All this time we were trying to book for one hotel chain which had a limited number of rooms and limited hotels. Now what if we wanted to book for all the hotels in the world? What can we do? Now, a thing to consider over here is all the pieces of infrastructure, okay? Be it hotel service, search service, our SQL clusters, our Elasticsearch clusters, Cassandra and everything and anything. All of them are horizontally scalable. We can obviously shard it, like I have covered in another system design video, how sharding can help you improve your performance, how sharding can help you scale your service whenever it grows. So you can use concepts like sharding in order to improve your performance. And since all of them are horizontally scalable, you can add more nodes of hotel service, you can add more SQL clusters for the hotel cluster and so on. And you can easily extend it to the scale where you cater all the hotels in the world and all the rooms are available at your service. Now I think that's it for our hotel reservation system design. I hope you enjoyed going through this content and found it insightful. If yes, do give it a thumbs up. You can let me know in the comment section where we could have improved. And also, if you want to keep receiving such insightful content in the future, don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe to Scaler's YouTube channel. See you in another video.